And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with the Game Boy Geek.
Hello my friends, it's the Game Boy Geek here. I think everybody's dreamt at one point of being a private investigator, going around, trying to hunt around for sniffing for clues. Today we are going to be a private investigator. We're talking about PI from Tree Frog Games, designed by Martin Wallace. It's 2 to 5 players, plays in 45 to 60 minutes. This is a deduction game. Kind of clue-esque where you're trying to figure out the suspect, the location, and the crime, but there's no rolling and moving, so don't worry. I mean, this is Martin Wallace by the name. Anyway, I'll show you how it's played, and I'll see you on the side and tell you what I finally think. Here we've got PI set up for a round of play. Let's talk about how the game is played. We've got a board, we've got some tiles, we've got some investigation cards, and let's talk about how it plays. The game's played over 3 rounds, and in each round, each person's going to have their own case to solve. Everyone's going to get shuffled in these 3 different decks: suspect, location, and crime. Each person is going to get one of these cards, obviously to keep secret from everybody else. This is actually Pop is the person, Roadhouse is the location, and Protection Racket is the crime. This is the case that the person to my left has to solve. So I know what their case is. The person to my right knows my case. Now when we look at the board, we see there's a lot of different locations that are around here. And in each location, we have a suspect tile, it has the location name, and we have a crime tile. These tiles are shuffled up and randomly distributed every round of the game. So for example, in Main Street, we have Bubbles as the person, and there's no crime there. Some of them have no suspect, and some of them have no crime. On your turn, you can do one of 3 things. One is you can place one of these investigator tokens. Let's say that I'm the yellow player, and I have an investigator token, and I can place them here. I only have 5 of these for the entire 3 rounds or 3 cases of the game. So you want to use them judiciously. So I put this here, and the person to my left who knows my solution will look and see. Let's take a closer look. Now an investigator is sort of very powerful because what the person who knows my solution is going to look at, they're going to find out if the person, the place, or the crime is either on this exact spot, or are any of those 3 parts of the crime on any spot that's adjacent or touching this in any way, shape, or form. So if, for example, the person who was one of those 3 things of the crime, if it was right here, they would say, for every one of those, they'd say place a disc. And a disc would go right on the investigator. It wouldn't go on it. They would just go on the investigator. So I would know, all right, at least one of the things that I was looking for is actually here. In this case, it's either Main Street or Bubbles because there's no crime there. Now, if they said place a cube, well, this tells me that one of the 3 items, person, place, or crime, is adjacent. So I don't know which one, but I know one of those 3 things is adjacent. If they said, hey, place 2 cubes, then I know that 2 things of the crime are around me. If they said place 1 disc and 2 cubes, then I'd say, okay, one of them is here, and then the other 2 are somewhere around there. So you can get sometimes a lot of information from your investigators, but you only have 5 of these, and you don't get them back, even at the end of the round. Now that would have been my turn. It would have went to the next person. So one thing you can do, as I just showed you, is an investigator. The other thing you can do is grab an investigation card. So here we have randomly selected 9 cards that get shuffled at the beginning of each round. And you can take one of these and essentially ask the person who knows your solution about it. So let's say my previous turn, I did get 1 cube for Main Street, and maybe I thought, well, hey, maybe it was a location, and let's check Central Station as a location. So for my one and only action for my turn, I take the Central Station card, put it in front of me. Now the person who to my left that knows my solution would look at the cards of my solution and try to tell me something about Central Station. Now because I asked about something specific, if they tell me to put a disc, I put it right on the Central Station because I asked about a place. If they said place a cube, again, because it was about a specific place, it wasn't the general investigator, I put it on here, and then that would tell me, well, the true place is somewhere around there like that, adjacent. Now remember, one of my 3 things was from the investigator. Now, if this actually was the same data as this, and it was Central Station, meaning when I played this, they put this cube here, if Central Station was what this data represented, when I played the Central Station card, they would simply just take the cube from here and put it here, because now that is actually the piece of information that was there. Otherwise, you wouldn't know. If you put this here and you put this here, you wouldn't really know, okay, is it the Central Station or not? And that's how you're trying to narrow down where things are. Now, because I actually got information, this central station would go in the discard pile, and another card would come out to help because there's always 9 out there. If I had no information from central, they said, nope, nothing, no cube, no disc, I would keep this. And over time, I will start to maybe learn about places that my things aren't. So, hey, I know it's not in Central Station, it's not adjacent. It's not downtown, it's not adjacent. It's not at Rick's, it's not adjacent. And these are sort of your note-taking. There's no notes because you just use what's in front of you and you use the board to try to figure out where things are and where they aren't. And the last action you could possibly take, again, you're only taking 1 per turn, is you could basically say you know what it is. And let's say I say, hey, it's a murder, it's at Union Square, and it was Bubbles. And I put those discs there, and the person would tell me whether I'm right or wrong. If I am wrong, I would go down here, minus to the next box, which is -2. And if I guessed it again wrong sometime during any of the 3 rounds, it would go down. And it can go all the way down to -10 points on the other side of the board. Now, if I got it right, I was the first one to get it right. I'd put my first case here, because it's the first round, on 7. Now, let's say I was the start player. This was in front of me. Everyone gets an even amount of turns. So let's say the red player on the same round, even though it was after me, it was the same round, meaning it was the same amount of turns, they also did it. They would get a 7 there for the first case as well. And let's say the next player got it 1 round later, and that would be green. And you keep going like that, and every time someone else gets one afterwards on a different round, they go down 7, 5, 3, and there's 1 and 0 on that side. Once everyone has solved their case, essentially you take all the tiles, reshuffle them up, take all these investigator cards, shuffle them up, take all the actual suspect locations, shuffle them up. You pretty much deal it up like it's a brand new round again. And then you do it, and then you would score your second case. You'd do that whole round again, resetting up. Third case, and at the end, you would add up all the points that your first, second, and third case are, minus whatever box your penalty points are in, and that's your score. And the one who has the most points at the end is the winner. All right, well, if you've watched my videos, you know I love deduction. And this game, honestly, I gotta say, isn't one of my favorite deduction games. There's a few things that it does really well that I think is cool. A lot of people, the things that a lot of people don't like about deduction games is a lot of the note-taking and the sheets and stuff, and this kind of does away with that. Similar to like Lady Alice did last year, where everything was kept on the board and you didn't have to write anything down, and I thought that was cool. And this did the same thing, where you don't have to write anything down because everything's in front of you. You have cubes marking things, you have evidence cards in front of you that are showing you that nothing's there, and you can kind of look down and just piece things together in your brain without having to write down a bunch of notes. Granted, you could take notes if you wanted, I guess. The rules don't say you can't, but it doesn't say you can't either. So I like that aspect where they took the note-taking out of it. The part I didn't really like about it is the amount of randomness that can happen in the game. Now, granted, it is 3 rounds long, so if someone gets a good setup, they throw an investigator down, you've got like a disc and 2 cubes or 2 discs in a cube, they pretty much are going to win that round hands down. And I guess over time, if you've played 3 rounds, then hopefully that randomness would even out. But sometimes it doesn't. So be warned that if you're looking for a pure deduction game that has no randomness, this one's not for you. If you don't mind randomness in deduction games, then maybe you want to look at this one. But overall, playing the game, another good positive thing, not a lot of deduction games can play with 2 players. And some of them say they can play with 2 players, but they really can't. This one does play with 2 players and actually plays it pretty well. There's actually another variant on Board Game Geek about how to score at 2 players, and that variant I like better than the regular way, but it can be played with 2 players. So there's not a lot of games that fit that niche. So if you're a deduction player that often has 2 players, but you can't ever get that 3rd player, this alone, because of that, you might want to look at this. But overall, it did not impress me enough to want to have it be one of the main deduction games that I'll pull out with people. There was just a little bit too much randomness. There can be some downtime if you're playing with 4 or 5 players. By the time it gets around to you, there's not a lot. Sure, you can be looking around and thinking, and the more people, once they figure out things and have discs on things, that will help you narrow yours down. So theoretically, it should be a little faster with more people, but it probably evens out because then there's still that many more turns. So there's a little bit of downtime in between turns, a little bit of randomness, and just the whole experience, it just didn't, I don't know how to explain it other than it didn't really just grab me like many deduction games do. But there's enough interesting things here that if you like 2 players and things like that, you might want to check this out anyway. So that's the deduction game, PI.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at DicetowerNetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.